Hi class, I'm going to go over what buttons are, how you're going to use them for both this assignment and your final project, as well as some basics animation techniques, and most importantly, how to test and submit your files. So I created this animation, but before we get to that, when you start a project, we need to open up the file correctly and set the settings. So first, your final project, the ratio is going to be up to you as long as it fits on a screen properly when you're testing. But for your ad assignment, you have requirements for your aspect ratios. So you need to choose 728 by 90, 250 by 250. Pick one of these. I'm going to go with 300 by 250. So let's go ahead and type those in. Keep your frame rate at 24. 30 also works, but I'm going to suggest 24. And make sure your platform type here is Canvas. While your rubric says you can create it with ActionScript 3.0 or JavaScript, your submission requires an HTML publish package. ActionScript is not compatible with that. You would need to convert the code at the end, which is an unnecessary step. So I recommend starting with HTML package and coding with JavaScript, and I'll show you how to use code snippets to do that easily. So, with those settings in, create. Let's start our first button. So you can either insert a new symbol, or you can create it right on your screen and then convert it afterward. So let's go ahead and do it here first. I'm just going to do a simple rectangle. This one is yellow. This I want to be my button, so I'm going to select it, convert to symbol, I'm going to call it test. Type button. Now it shows up in my library. Next, we're going to go ahead and get our publish settings correct so we can see this square in our browser. And we're going to test obnoxiously often, because when things go wrong, especially for you guys students, you need to know when it happened so you know how to fix it. If you don't know what to fix, it gets really, really hard, especially in the beginning. So let's go to File, Publish Settings. If this looks different on your screen, you need to convert your project. It means you're not in Canvas. So if you have an ActionScript project, you need to convert to Canvas. If you don't see Canvas here, you're probably in the right project type. Once that's all done, if needed, go back to your publish settings. These are the changes it's going to have you make. First, set texture to sprite sheet. This is more efficient. It's going to work better with playing this locally on your browser. Texture is a little bit more quality, but we need more performant. Secondly, we're going to change the title here. So I'm going to call this test ad, and I'm going to tell it where I need to save it. So what I recommend is wherever you put it in your computer, remember where it's located, and create a new folder, new empty folder. This publish process is going to generate multiple files. We need them all together, and they all need to be submitted for the project to work correctly. So keep them contained so you know where they are. I also like to turn these two checkboxes off. Loop, because it's just a little bit easier for me, and include hidden layers, because if we turn that off, because if we hide something here, I don't want it to show up in the final project. I hid it for a reason. Alright, publish. We can go to that folder, and it created 2 files for us in this case. Later on in the class, you may have more, probably up to 4. Let's test this HTML. It is now pulling up in the browser, and you can even see it's recognizing it as a button because our cursor is changing shape. It's not doing anything yet, it's really small, but that is step 1. So click OK. Now we need this button to do something. So we're going to add a web link functionality to it. So select what you want to put the code to. So this is our button. Go to your actions. I have it docked here. If you do not, you can go to Window, and this will pull up a floating window, and you can grab the name actions and put it up here. Wait for, yeah, and it will drop. It's handy, you'll be using it a lot. Next, we're going to go to snippets, which is this icon. Using the canvas drop-down, and web link is under actions. We're going to double click to go to web page. It automatically gives our button the instance name button 1. We could have changed that. I'll show you how to do that in a bit. But for now, we know when we click it, it's going to take us to Adobe. Test it. Make sure everything working as expected. Perfect. It is functional. If we wanted to change this, we would put in the new URL here with the quotations. I'm going to go ahead and have it take us to Google. If you're not sure what to do with a code snippet, they always tell you instructions on how they work and what to do with it. For example, replace with the desired URL, keep the quotation marks. So next, if we go into the button, we have some more options. We have up, over, down, and hit as the 4 sections of our timeline. Up is what our button looks like now. It is the generic look. You're not interacting with it. This is just what the button looks like. However, in certain circumstances, you could have the button change. So if I wanted to have a different look every time I hover over the button, I could add a keyframe here and say the color changes. So let's change it to green. So every time I hover over the button, it turns color. Maybe I also want it to have an effect when I click down on the button. In this case, instead of changing color, I'm going to have it change shape. So let's do a circle. So I'm going to turn on onion skin just so I can see where that square is. And I'm going to put that circle right there. Voila. And let's see what this looks like. File, publish. Just close that. Test. So green when I hover over it, and circle is really quickly when I select it. However, changing to a circle is a little silly, but just to show you that this can look like whatever it needs to be. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that frame, insert the keyframe again. Instead, I'm going to have it move down and over a little bit when click down. So we have a web link that interacts with our cursor, takes us to Google, but there's no animation yet. You need a full 8 seconds of animation. That's 190 frames at 24 frames per second. Is that 190? I'll have to do the math. As long as you're somewhere in here or past, it's okay. Now, here is the animation I already made. It is 8 seconds long. I have simple point A to point B tweens, nothing too fancy other than I do have more practice at this. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. I have certain things moving into the scene and a plane moving across. I turn the moon into a ball bounce that changes into the logo. And then it ends up with our call to action, book your destination today. It's 8 seconds long. So for the animation portion, I'm looking for something like this. Let's turn this book your destination today into a web link button. So we've already done this before, but let's go ahead and right click. Make sure you're selecting the correct thing. So this is actually the image here. Make sure you're selecting what you want to change. Convert to symbol. Let's call this call to action web link button. Now this button, we want to click to go to web page, except I want to change this. I don't like it being called button 1. I'm going to lose track of what I'm doing when there's a bunch of different code in here. So I'm actually going to call this just CTA. Now, program doesn't know that this button is CTA anymore because I changed it here. I need to also have the instance name for this button match. So CTA. They are case sensitive, so make sure they're exactly the same. Perfect. And have it go to Google. And let's test it. Let's look at our publish settings. Everything looks good. Set to sprite sheet. I'm going to download into a new folder. I'm going to call it travel ad. Save. Publish. I'm also going to go ahead and get rid of this test ab just so I don't have multiple things in here I don't need. If I'm not sure if I deleted the right things, I can just get rid of all of them and publish again. Yep, these are the 3 things I need. Now this one's a little bit different. I now have an images folder. This HTML will not work without this images folder. So be warned, you need everything it generates. Let's test this HTML just like I would when grading. Alright. It's recognizing it's a button, but only on the letters themselves. That's a little obnoxious, isn't it? But when I have it selected, it does work. So let's make that button a little easier to select by double-clicking, going to our timeline, and setting our up, over, down, and hit. So first thing, I'm going to make the over. I like having buttons change color when I'm hovering over it. It's a really good indicator for the user that, hey, this is something I can interact with, I can click on, let's see what happens. Let's insert a keyframe here, and let's get that color to change. So double click to select all of your text, and let's go to my mono blue color palette that I created. As a quick blurb, if you want to create your own palette, you can go to the swatches menu, also in your window setting under swatches. You can create a new folder, call it whatever you want, and then if you want to add a color to it, it's really simple. Choose the color you want. So say I want a purple, but I don't want this purple. I'm going to create my own custom like orchidy gray color. Something like that. Select the folder I want to put it in and click the plus sign. I now have that color in my new palette. So use that. These colors that it gives you to start off with are honestly pretty terrible. Okay, so now when I hover over the button, it changes color. I don't need a down, so I'm just going to insert a frame here. I do want to insert a keyframe and hit, because right now the only thing I can select are the individual letters. To make that bigger is as simple as creating a shape of any color as long as it's filled in, and now this whole area is my button to select that reacts with the cursor. Let's go ahead and publish and test this. And now it is much easier to select. Before I move on, let me give you a quick explanation of how to submit your assignment to Brightspace. So you have all of your files together as published by your animation. We know this HTML works. When you click on it, we test it in the browser. We have all things together. What you want to do is now save your project. So I'm just going to go ahead and save as again, just to make sure I have it. And I'm going to put my add example, this one I just saved, into that folder. I have it open, that's fine. I can go ahead and close out, I just saved it. And now I have 3 of my files as well as my FLA. Take everything, you can either click and drag like I did, or click holding shift, it will grab the whole selection between. Just grab all of the files you need, right click, and compress to zip file. When you submit to Brightspace, I need it to be inside of a zip. If you submit the HTML, the JavaScript, without all the pieces or separately, the link between these files will break. Even if I just delete the images file, you'll see the HTML no longer pulls up and works. Everything needs to work together and they have to be connected. Zip is the only way to get it through Brightspace without it breaking. So when you open up Brightspace, you go to your assignment for 3.2. This is what you're going to put in there. Now let's say you're in your final project and you want to do different kinds of interactivity. Obviously, a web link doesn't really tell much of a story, does it? So this is the interaction you need for your ad assignment, but to continue on and give you some more information of how this is going to work for your final project, let's make a start button. So I have different things in folders. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to call this start. I'm going to create a button right in the middle. I'm not going to care what it looks like, just to give you the idea. Convert to symbol. The button type. Now this button, I want to have it take me to the next frame and continue playing. So go to Actions, Code Snippets, and I want to navigate the timeline, and I want to go to frame 2. So if I want to click this button, go to a specific frame and continue playing, looks like it's this one. And according to the directions, I need to replace the number 5. So if I want to go to frame 2, I'll put a 2 here, except that's not correct. Your timeline numbering system starts with 1. Code numbers start with 0. So your timeline and your code numbers are always going to be off by 1 number. So if code starts counting from 0, think about it this way. If you start counting your fingers from 0, starting on your left pinky, by the time you get all the way to your right pinky, you're only going to have 9 fingers, even though we know that's probably not true. So if I wanted to go to frame 10, I'd actually type in a 9. If I want to go to frame 2, I actually type in a 1. It's always 1 number less than the frame number you actually want to go to. If I also want this button to not say button 2, but say start, I can change it. Just make sure it matches the instance name section of the properties. Case sensitive, so I have capital S start, capital S start. All right, let's test this. Oh no, it's not going away, but it is restarting my animation. So 2 things. We don't want our start button to hang around after we've clicked it, so let's zoom in here on our timeline. We want to make it go away on frame 2. so we can insert a blank keyframe so it makes it disappear. We also don't want this to continue playing. We want it to stop here on frame 1. So we need code to do that. So we want to put our cursor where we want the animation to stop, which is right at the beginning. And we're going to use a stop at this frame code snippet. We don't need to do anything else to it. It is inserted here on frame 1. Nothing goes in these parentheses. It does not tell you to do so. So let's go ahead and publish and test. So now it pauses here, nothing else is happening, and that causes our animation to continue playing. Say we didn't want to see everything and we just wanted to skip to the end. We can also add a skip button to navigate around out of order. So let's go ahead and I'm going to type in skip. I can't type. Let's change color, make this easy to read. Maybe something like that. How would I put it? Right there. Let's change this into a symbol. And let's put a hitbox. Let's even make it nice and big. So now we want this button from the very beginning. Oh, except we don't want it on the actions layer, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Make sure we know what layer things are going on. Let's put it there. There we go. We want it to, that's fine, we can leave it there. We want this button to take us to the last frame and stop. So our last frame is 194. So we're going to type in a 193. So that's our start button. I always forget to type in the instance name until I'm done, but let's go ahead and rename this skip. Make sure it matches here. Looks good, and test. That continues playing, and this skips to the end. So sometimes you're going to have a problem. I tried to make it happen, but of course it's not doing it now. When the hitboxes of two different buttons overlap, it will cause both of them to break. So be careful that the hits don't overlap. This case it didn't have a problem with it. But anytime any two buttons are showing at the same time, it could be. So I'm going to go ahead and make this smaller just for my peace of mind and make sure those aren't touching or overlapped. I could also just move this skip button somewhere else. So you can use your buttons to navigate around. Maybe I'll actually open up Paint and give you an idea of how things would work. So if you have your timeline, which is a straight line from frame 1 to frame, say, 500 even. You have your intro take up the first 100 frames. And then after your intro, you're going to have two buttons on screen to go to option A or B. I really should get my tablet so this is easier, but here we go. Option A takes you to the next frame, which is 102, and continues playing until it stops here at, say, 150. But option B, you don't want to see this scenario. So we're going to have it be next in the timeline. So this chunk. So this is A and this is B. With a stop here at the end of each section. So we click A, we see this chunk and stop. We click B, we skip over A, we see this chunk and stop. But this can be even more obnoxious. Say you have a whole tree of options. Say this is the intro, this is path A, which is an automatic failure, and B, which gives you options for do you help, no. If you click yes, maybe you go to a great scenario. If you click no, maybe this one takes you back here to the automatic fail. So you need to figure out how to way to make all of this happen linearly. The cool thing is if you want to have an option after A, you don't need to see B. You have it stop here, you have a continue button that skips over B and takes you here. Just like we had a skip button, if this was the, if you click the correct answer, you see everything play out, versus if you click the wrong answer, it would automatically skip you and take you to the very end where it's So a little confusing. You'll wrap your brain around it eventually. If you have any questions, be sure to ask. This goes over a lot of information today to get you prepped as you start planning for your final project and do your first interactive assignment this week. Good luck, and as always, let me know if you have any problems.